For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, joined by Connor Morrissette for instant analysis from USC's 33-30 loss in the Coliseum to number 4 Penn State. Connor, it's another game where USC brings it down to the wire, a game where they had a fourth quarter lead, a chance to win, and unlike the 2016 Rose Bowl where USC walked it off on a field goal, this time it's Penn State who gets a little bit of revenge and wins in the Coliseum, planting the flag at midfield after the game with a 3-point win.
Really tough game for USC, a heartbreaker, just about ending their college football playoff hopes, which that's what every season at USC is all about, of course, and to be out of that mix just about on October 12th is bitterly disappointing. If this was USC's first loss and it's to Penn State, the number 4 team in the country at home in this fashion, you'd say, okay, the season's still on track. It's tough, but when it's your third loss, eventually these are stacking up. I mean, Lincoln Riley never lost 3 games at Oklahoma, and he's lost 3 games in all 3 years at USC, and the third loss is getting earlier and earlier every season, which is disappointing. This rebuild that he's talked so much about is going in the wrong direction. And USC, of course, they're in a different league now. The challenge is different, but in year 3 of Lincoln Riley, being 3-3, to begin the season, that's just not going to cut it. And yes, USC was close today. They had opportunities to win against one of the best teams in the country at home, but it's consistently now this team not being able to get it done at Michigan, at Minnesota. They're 1-3 in conference. They just got to win games. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and it feels like another game that they played better football, and they were in a position to win. Had a 14-point lead at halftime. Kind of a reversal of what happened in the Coliseum the last time we were here, where USC came back from down 11 at the half against Wisconsin. But another game where USC can't put the pieces together to lead a game-winning drive. They don't lose in regulation, luckily, after the Miller-Moss interception, but then they stall in overtime, miss the field goal. And once you don't score in the first overtime, and the second team is getting the ball, you feel like you've lost. Maybe the one hope for USC was true freshman kicker on the other side, recently elevated to the starting role, but he was nails where Michael Lance missed, and USC only went backwards on its drive and just felt like, again, the recipe was there, but USC could not execute. And at some point, it gets hard to say that as not an excuse, but as the reasoning for a loss. Maybe it made sense for the first loss against Michigan, made a little bit less sense against Minnesota. Now USC's 500. Lincoln Riley went 55-10 at Oklahoma. He's 22-11 now at USC, and he's just in his 3rd season, now halfway through. It's getting tough, I'm sure, for USC fans to take losses like this when they know it could have been a win.
Absolutely, and we should talk, Jack, about the end of regulation play where Riley has 3 timeouts and elects not to use them. I know a lot of USC fans were really frustrated with that plan, but to me, if Miller Moss executes and just hits Deuce Robinson in a good spot, USC picks up that 3rd down. It's a long field goal, but they have a chance to try a walk-off field goal after that, and instead Moss's pass is a little high. Robinson's a tall receiver. It deflects off his hands. I haven't had a chance to look at that play too closely, but regardless of who's at fault there, they didn't get it done. And that's a play that you'd expect a Lincoln Riley coach team with Miller Moss, Deuce Robinson, 2 premier players. You'd expect them to make that play when the receiver's open, and USC would have had a chance for a walk-off field goal. Now, if they used some timeouts earlier, could things have been different and maybe they get closer for a field goal or maybe even score a touchdown? Yes, but I'm not going to hammer Riley for his end-of-game clock management when the players just didn't execute. If Robinson is able to catch that ball or the throw's better for Moss, they probably kick a field goal. And yes, Lance missed an overtime. Maybe he makes that one at the end of regulation and USC walks it off. So I know some people were really frustrated. If you have the timeouts, use them, get some time and run better plays. But I didn't have a huge issue with it because USC, let's be honest, if they just execute, they have a chance for a walk-off win. So I'm not hammering them for that. For me, I just go back to the roster construction and him talking about the rebuild and more his general manager role. The defense has been gassed 2 weeks in a row. The questions for us, Jack, all offseason were about the defensive depth, particularly on the interior, and I felt like in the second half, again, that was called into question. And, I mean, USC was outscored, I think, 24-10 at the end of this game. So, again, they finished slowly, and that's really more where I think the problem is. You can second-guess Riley, I guess, but it's not like USC didn't have a chance to win there.
Well, and if they call timeouts after the interception by Penn State, there's not 5 seconds left. There's maybe 45 seconds left and a chance for that game-winning field goal to come in regulation. So I get it. Hindsight's 20/20. I agree. At first I thought, wow, they really should call timeouts here because I think you'd rather die by your offense and just say, hey, I'm going to take timeouts. We're going to go to the sideline, draw up our best plays. We're going to go out and score. And if we don't score, props to them for stopping us, and then we hope our defense gets a stop. I kind of thought the first time, hey, maybe you should call a timeout. Just try and win it with your offense, and if you can't, that's okay. At least You lost because of the best side of the football that you have. And then eventually when I started to think about it a little bit more, I did think it made sense to not quite call the timeouts. Maybe they brought it down a little too far, and maybe at some point they could have let the clock run down, then call a timeout so that at very least they could have a conversation on the sideline about the play. I think it was curious. We'll probably need to go back and rewatch it, see if we feel any different about it. But again, too many problems, too many mistakes made for USC. Again, a fourth quarter lead. You figure in close games like this, eventually they have to come out with a win. And I think that's what stings so much. And that's where you can maybe start to understand what Riley is saying about last week. Hey, we're 2 plays away from being 5-0. I don't think he said this week we're 3 plays away from being 6-0, but you certainly feel like that's what they think in the locker room. And maybe it's right, but also at the same time, this probably shouldn't have been a one-play game. USC was up by 14 at halftime, came out conservative to start the second half, let up far too many big plays to the Penn State offense that hadn't been able to be explosive in the first half. I mean, you allow 17 catches to Tyler Warren, the tight end. That's the FBS record by a tight end in any game in college football history. He goes for 224 and a touchdown. Again, there's just way too many things that you can pluck as a mistake that USC made. And again, one too many probably, and it cost USC a win.
I mean, it all goes back to what Bill Parcells famously said. You are what your record says you are. So, yes, USC's been close and there are 3 losses, but they have 3 losses. And when Lincoln Riley was hired, I don't think anyone expected them to be 3-3 on October 12th of his 3rd season. This is a rebuild that in the era of a transfer portal, you can flip rosters really quickly and you can be really good really fast. And how many times in the offseason and even previous off seasons have we talked about, oh, they missed this recruit, they missed that recruit, whether it's high school, whether it's transfer portal. It might sound like I'm piling on, but to me, that's sort of what this is all about. If they just have a little bit more talent, they probably win tonight. And if they just have a little bit more talent, they probably win against Michigan. And yes, that's not just the only thing that's wrong with this team, but that's kind of what I keep going back to. I felt like the offensive line took a step forward today, Jack. In the second half, they were sort of up and down, but that looked a little bit better today. So it's not like one area of the field. It was like, okay, this is this major problem. But I did think the defense got a little bit tired at the end of this game. And if you had more depth there, you probably win.
I think they actually looked pretty even on the talent front for the majority of the game. If you just look at the totality of the 60 minutes and then overtime, I thought USC had as many talented players as Penn State did. I thought the talent matched up, and even in areas where they were maybe talent deficient, they shored it up, especially on the offensive line, to grab the win. But when one thing takes a step forward in the offensive line, some of the receivers take a step back. And when the running game is good in the first half, it's not in the second half. And I feel like, once again, it's a week where the Trojans got away from the run with a 14-point lead. They didn't commit to the run game much in the second half. And I'm all for being unpredictable, and you don't want to just run it right into the teeth of the defense every time, especially with a defense that good in Penn State. But whether it's in terms of getting away from the run game, less creative play calling in the second half, Penn State never stopped being creative and using backup QBs and lining up Warren as a center and then having him pass it to Drew Allen. They never really stopped with plays like that. Felt like after the Quentin Joyner play and some other ones from USC, Trojans got less creative, and eventually they let Penn State back into it.
I mean, USC, of course, is close in talent to Penn State. My point is, if USC had thrown 2 interceptions like Aller did, and they give the other team 6 points, I don't think they're able to climb out of that hole like a Penn State is. So it's close, but I thought Penn State just kind of eked out there a little bit from a talent perspective. But you're absolutely right. It's not this massive gap. I mean, Quentin Joyner, that 75-yard touchdown run, he certainly looked like the top 100 recruit that he was. And Woody Marks has been phenomenal this season. You're right about the USC receivers. They were a little bit up and down today. I thought Mekhi Lemon had a good game. The one thing that stands out to me, Jack, about Penn State, I mean, on that final touchdown drive for them in regulation, getting the 4th and 7 and the 4th and 10, those were 2 just gutsy plays by Penn State, and it's tough to get on the USC defense, but, I mean, Jamil Muhammad, it looked like he had a chance to bring down Aller on one of those 4th down plays, and they just didn't execute. So, to me, I look at 3 pretty key critical execution mistakes from USC, the 2 4th down plays on defense, and then the interception from Moss at the end of regulation. And when Riley says we're 1 or 2 plays away, like, those are the ones that we're talking about. The problem is they've just consistently been 1 or 2 plays away in these defeats, and like I keep saying, they're piling up.
Well, and then you also have the missed kick at the end of the first overtime drive. I'm curious what you thought about the way that USC played offensively coming out of regulation at the start of overtime. They go backwards on 3 plays and they miss the field goal. Did you feel like that was the right play call? Did you feel like USC was in the right spot? What did you see from USC as it took the field in overtime?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was 1st down pass, 2nd down run for a loss of 4, and then 3rd down, they weren't able to pick up a 1st down. I feel like the run was pretty solid. Like, wasn't that the first big loss on a running play? So it's tough to get on them too much. You just got to make that kick. Ideally, you go and you score, but I don't really know. I like, of course you want them to play a little bit better there, but it's not like, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that. They were running the ball pretty well in this game, and on one play in overtime, when the money's on the table, they lose 4 yards. So that was disappointing. If I had to second guess, I'd probably say that maybe you run it on first down, but they were pretty consistent with whether it was running or whether it was passing. After that third quarter, like in the fourth quarter, they were picking up nice chunk plays on first downs, and they just didn't in overtime. So again, I'm not too disappointed with what happened there. From a play calling perspective, they didn't execute, of course. To me, I just go back to those fourth down plays and then the Miller-Moss interception. This should have been a game USC won in regulation.
Yeah, I agree. I know USC fans wanted some pass interference calls and overtime. David Pollack, former ESPN media personality, said that there were two missed PI calls on USC's two passes of overtime. I'd have to watch them again. I did feel like maybe Jacoby Lane was hit a little bit early. I don't know about the one to Mekhi Lemon in the end zone as much. I know there was an Anthony Lucas roughing the passer on that final touchdown drive for Penn State that USC fans thought was weak, and I did too, seeing the replay. But I thought it was a game both ways that was officiated about the same. They let the guys play. I don't think there was a defensive pass interference call the entire game, so at least it was consistent, although I think it's another week where USC fans assumed or think that they were on the wrong side of the officiating.
Which is understandable, but again, like, how many games can you be close and it's like, oh, the refs boned us? Like, eventually you just got to win, and it's disappointing. You're right, some of those pass interference calls late probably would have changed the game. I felt like Zion Branch got to the tight end, Warren, for Penn State a little bit early on his touchdown reception, but he still caught that ball, so they didn't end up throwing a flag there. We could go back and forth all game, but there were certainly some questionable decisions. I mean, that Kamari Ramsey illegal block penalty, people didn't love that. I didn't think the Walker Lyons penalty, like that one, could have gone either way. He did go kind of low when he made his block. So, yeah, there are some penalties that I understand the frustration. But, I mean, like, are we going to do this every week?
Yeah, I agree. It is hard. We come in front of the camera and we try and say different things. Yeah. I honestly feel like we're a broken record, whether that's here, whether that's instant analysis during the week, whether it's the two tunnel vision shows we do, the other podcasts. It does feel like we're getting to say the same things every single week. And I know USC fans are asking the question. I'm going to ask it to you. Do you just feel like that's what's going to define this Lincoln Riley tenure? Do you feel like there's a way out of this?
Yeah, I feel like there's a way out of this, and I've pretty consistently said that. Right now, it's been disappointing, but I'd like to see them change their NIL strategy. I'd like to see them be more aggressive with recruiting, which is going to have to be a change to get some of these premier classes, because there are instances, like you look at TCU, you look at Indiana right now, you don't have to have that marquee NIL set up to get results on the field, but it certainly helps. I mean, look at Texas, look at what Tennessee's doing, look at what Ole Miss is doing, although they had a disappointing loss, and who knows what they're going to do today, so that might be a bad example. The evidence is there, though, that you have to recruit at the highest level to compete for championships, and that's where USC wants to be, and that's where they should be. This is USC. This isn't some other school that can't compete at the national level. So I kind of start there. I think some changes need to be made from that perspective, but I mean, I always compare it to Jim Harbaugh. Harbaugh, he was sort of up and down, and USC this year, this record may end up being a little bit worse than some of those Harbaugh teams. He did have the bad COVID season, which wasn't really a season. It was an abbreviated one. He still won a lot of games, and Riley might struggle to match that so far the way this year's going. But I still think Riley's a really good coach. He showed he could change hiring the defensive staff, and although the defense got tired today, I still feel like that unit, like if this was last year's defense, USC probably loses by 3 scores. So they've taken some steps in the right direction. It hasn't been as quick as people wanted, but Riley's not going anywhere. He signed a massive contract, and I do think his track record is solid, even though it's sort of slipping in the wrong direction. You just have to hope he figures it out, and I think he will, because you can't keep doing the same thing. I mean, how many games do they have to lose by a few plays here or there for them to change something else going forward? I do think we'll see changes, and I do think they'll bounce back. You got to really prioritize this 2025 class that's top 10 right now. Get some good transfer guys in next year, and then hopefully you're cooking with gas. But, I mean, it's sad that we're already talking about it. It's like a bad NFL team talking about the NFL draft right now. USC still, of course, has a lot to play for, but this was a team where if everything went right, they had a really high ceiling, and we're kind of seeing them come back down to that floor a little bit, which after beating LSU was disappointing.
I think we saw again this week that especially here at home, USC is a good team They're probably the best 3-loss team in the country right now. Problem is, you can't say that without the team having 3 losses, and USC does. It's been a disappointing start to the year. Certainly a disappointing start for USC to Lincoln Riley's tenure after the big flash in year 1, and that's the potential of where the program can go. There's a real argument that they could be 6-0 right now, and Lincoln Riley mentioned they've played the hardest schedule in America through the first 6 games. They've been right there in every single game. They've had a fourth quarter lead in every single game, but once again, they come up short. A lot more questions I'm sure will follow, and obviously the college football playoff likely now completely out of the picture after they were on the brink last week, which means maybe we see different stuff this season. Maybe we see a USC group that comes back, doesn't make the playoff, but they play some of the younger guys like a Desmond Stevens who had an interception today. But we'll have a lot more questions, I'm sure, that pop up and a lot more commentary throughout the week. Tunnel Vision show tomorrow where we'll have some refreshed thoughts after being able to rewatch the game, see some of the plays back, and fully sleep on it. But for Connor Morrissette, I'm Jack Smith. Thank you guys for watching Instant Analysis. The interview, the post-game press conference is up here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and that you're checking out uscfootball.com for more content.